Thank you for making our program a part of your Earth Day celebration. Even though there's only three of you here, I'm really excited that you decided to join us. This is kind of the first time that we've done something like this on Earth Day as a city. So the history of Earth Day, it began in 1970. So this is the 51st Earth Day, and it was following bipartisan recognition of the need to act on air and water pollution. Oh, we have another guest. Great. So by the end of 1970, the first Earth Day led to the creation of the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the passage of other first of their kind environmental laws. So whether this presentation is your only way of celebrating or you've got some other activities planned beyond this today, Earth Day is something we can celebrate every day by thinking and acting in environmentally friendly ways. Joining us today is Patrick Hogan of the Neponset River Watershed Association, who will teach us more about how we can work together to protect our precious water resources. Patrick started with NEPRA in August 2019. He holds a bachelor's in crop and soil environmental sciences and a master's in environmental science and engineering, both from Virginia Tech. Prior to joining NEPRA, Patrick spent most of his career in municipal government, working in the public works departments of both the city of Roanoke, Virginia, and the city of Durham, North Carolina. At NEPRA, Patrick works on a regional basis with municipalities and businesses to provide technical assistance with stormwater-related issues. We ask that you remain muted throughout the entirety of Patrick's presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to share them in the chat box throughout the presentation or save them until the end. We will have time for questions following the presentation. This presentation is also being recorded so that it may be aired on Quincy Access Television in the coming weeks. So without further ado, take it away, and I will make you the host now, Patrick, so you can show us your slideshow.
All right, sounds good. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that. Welcome everybody and happy Earth Day. Really glad to be here talking to y'all today. And the topic that I wanted to kind of touch on is something that obviously I work with a lot. And it's something that especially in our area has such a wide-reaching impact on our environment. So I thought it was a really appropriate topic for today. And that's stormwater. It might be something you've heard of before. It might be something you've never thought of. It tends to be the kind of thing you don't think about until there's a problem. So regardless, hopefully leave today with a little bit more knowledge about it. I want to start off by just kind of covering what it is in case anybody's unfamiliar with it at all. And then I want to talk about a few of the issues that it presents. Stormwater itself generally is all right, but there's a lot of stuff associated with it and the management of it that can create problems, both for us and also environmentally. Then I've got a few tips on things that we can do ourselves in our day-to-day lives that'll really help these issues, help alleviate these issues. Because we all know it's like anything else. We can make big sweeping actions, but if we all make the tiny little changes in our day-to-day, that has the most profound impact on anything like this. So I've got a bunch of tips for that sort of stuff. And then finally, I want to fill you in on some of the stuff that the city of Quincy is doing for stormwater, because they've really been doing a great job and have been sort of seeking their own solutions to these issues. So I want to talk to you about that a little bit. So let's just jump right on into it. And what is stormwater? Well, the simplest way I can put it is stormwater is precipitation that lands on impervious surfaces and runs off. Impervious surfaces, when I say that, I mean any surface where water can't soak in. So I'm not talking about our lawns. I'm talking about our streets, our driveways, our sidewalks, our roofs, stuff like that, where the water can't soak in and it has to run off somewhere. The big thing I want to point out is that I said precipitation. I did not say rain. So often with this stuff, we have a tendency to think of rain because it immediately becomes stormwater, right? It hits the road, it runs off. It's immediately stormwater. But especially where we live, we have to consider snow melt as well, because as that snow melts, it is also stormwater, and it's also going to apply to everything else I have to say today. So it's running off. Where does it go now? This cartoon sort of illustrates it. It generally, in most areas around here, it will run to the storm drain system or the storm sewer system. You'll hear it termed both ways. This cartoon kind of illustrates that. Water will run off these impervious surfaces, go into an inlet. That's what those brown boxes are. And those inlets are connected to a network of pipes that send the flow directly to the nearest waterway. And that's it. It just sends it to the nearest waterway. It's that simple. The big thing is that there's no filtration and no treatment whatsoever on that flow at any point throughout this process. So that will really kind of play into what we talk about here with some issues. So if you see something going in a drain, you might as well figure it's going into the creek because there's nothing generally in between it to stop it. Here I've thrown in some pictures just to sort of bring that cartoon to life for us. On the left is an inlet. You'll see them in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. A lot of them will be grates like that. Sometimes it's just an opening in the curbing. Like I say, pretty much anything that you see, particularly in a roadway, that is open and collecting the free flow of water is most likely the storm drain system. And like I say, that's connected to a network of pipes. And on the right is how it ends at a waterway. And that is literally it. The pipe just stops. That's all there is to it. There's nothing special there. There's not even a screen or a filter or anything. It just goes right into the stream. So as I keep kind of hitting that issue that there's no filtration and no treatment at all, you can probably guess what the first issue I'm going to touch on is, and that's pollution. Stormwater can become polluted and can pick up pollutants along the way. That then it can easily deliver to our waterways. And that's where we get into this giant widespread impact. So stormwater pollution for me really falls into two categories when we start thinking about it. And number one is direct pollution. And it's exactly what you see here. Somebody dumping something directly into a storm drain system. This happens sometimes because people see it as an easy disposal pathway because, again, these systems are open to the free flow of water. They're easily accessible. So sometimes they see it as an easy disposal pathway. So this form of pollution, it's generally easier to track down because it's right. You just track it right to the source, and it's a little bit easier to address because the simple solution is don't dump anything. I mean that's the solution. Just don't dump anything. Getting folks to do that, of course, can be a little difficult sometimes, but that is the answer. Don't dump. The harder category to address is this indirect pollution. And I'll explain what I mean by that. It's indirect pollution is when pollution is spilled, particularly on impervious surfaces, and under its own power does not move to the drain. So an example would be this picture here with a car, and we're going to assume that's oil that has probably been leaking out. And you and I would probably look at that and say, oh, well, that's a stain. It's not going anywhere. It's not flowing down the street. It's just staining the ground. And that's correct. However, we both know what's going to happen the next time it rains. The rainwater coming off of there is going to have that kind of rainbow sheen that we'll see maybe if we're walking across a parking lot in a rainstorm. That rain is going to pick up that oil and move it to the drain and move it to the waterway. So this is a little bit harder of a category to address because it requires us as users of the storm sewer system, because that's what we are. We use the storm sewer system to drain water away from roads and things that we need. It requires us to think a step beyond where we're currently at. So yes, this is leaking on the pavement, but during the next rainstorm, it's going to make it to the storm drain. So we have to kind of take that extra step in thinking. So it's a little bit harder to address. I just wanted to list out some common stormwater pollutants to make sure we were kind of all on the same page and get us all thinking. The first category is really obvious ones, and they're ones we're probably all already thinking of right now. Oil, chemicals, fertilizer, pet waste, things that we know are problems, things that have warnings on the labels, things that we know are hazardous, things like that. If we took a poll right now, these things would probably be on the list. But there's some not so obvious pollutants that I really want to make sure we're all aware of as well, because they have just as much of an impact. The first being dirt. As dirt gets transported to our waterways, it can settle on the beds of these waterways, of these creeks and streams, and really change that habitat for the organisms that depend on it. And so it can have a very, very big problem. there. Also, leaves and grass clippings. That's one that's so easy to dismiss because we see them as natural, right? They come out of the ground. They're green. They're normal. They're natural. How can they be pollutants? Well, the problem really comes when you think of the storm sewer system as kind of a funnel, right? Because it's really capturing all the water from a neighborhood and funneling it to one spot in the stream. So if you apply that to leaves and grass clippings, it's taking all of the leaves and grass clippings in this neighborhood and putting them at one spot in the stream. You can see how overwhelming and problematic it can become. As these leaves and grass clippings decay, they release a lot of nutrients. It's the same concept as folks who compost, right? And then they use that compost as a nutrient-rich addition for their gardens. As these things decay, if they decay in the streams, they release those same nutrients into the stream. And an excess of nutrients in the stream can create a very big problem. Nutrients, and particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, are a very big pollution problem. They can lead to algal blooms, which we've all heard more and more about, it seems, every summer. They can cause a lot of problems. Further beyond that, as these things decay, the microorganisms that decay them use oxygen in that process. And if they decay in the stream, those microorganisms take the oxygen out of the stream to decay them. So you end up with a stream with very low levels of oxygen if you have a lot of organic materials like leaves and grass clippings there. And eventually, worst case scenario, it ends up with the heartbreaking situation of I've actually seen ponds where fish are actually surfacing above the water, gulping at the air because they can't breathe. There's not enough oxygen for them to breathe in the water, so they're trying any way they can to get a breath. So all of these organic materials can kind of lead to that. My fourth bullet there is ice melt, and that's something that I just wanted to bring to our attention. It's certainly something we use for safety, and I do not want to belittle safety, especially during the winter. We don't want anybody to slip and fall or anything like that. But we also need to be aware that ice melt, as it works, as it melts the ice, it gets absorbed into that water that the ice becomes, and it runs to the storm drain. So we want to use ice melt to be safe, but we also want to use it responsibly so that we're not overdoing it. And then my last thing there, that is in there for me. That is my pet peeve: environmentally friendly and biodegradable products. I have a whole slide dedicated to that in a little bit that we'll get to, but we just need to recognize that they're pollutants too. So really, when you're thinking about what a stormwater pollutant is, really you just need to focus on this last bullet. Anything that's collected by stormwater that isn't stormwater is a stormwater pollutant. In an ideal world, the only thing getting in a drain would be pure, clean stormwater. We don't live in an ideal world. We all know that. So we have to be aware of this. So anything that's not stormwater, we can think of it as a stormwater pollutant. Then here, hopefully this works with screen share. I linked to a video from Think Blue, Massachusetts to really drive this point home. This is a statewide education campaign for stormwater, and it just illustrates the point that I'm trying to make so well. So I'm going to push play, and hopefully it should come across pretty well. It's only 30 seconds long.
If stormwater pollution was rubber duckies, it wouldn't matter what went down storm drains. But it does. Because stormwater pollution is not rubber duckies. It's trash, oil, cigarette butts, and pet waste flowing untreated to the sea. That's not good for any of us because we all live downstream. Clean water. It means quality of life. Think Blue, Massachusetts.
All right, so hopefully that kind of brings it home. Like I say, it just makes the point so clear and vividly, I thought. There we go. So the other big issue I wanted to touch on with stormwater today is really related to climate change, and that's something we've all become more and more familiar with here lately. In our area particularly, but in many areas across the country, the storm drain system was installed a long time ago. That's obvious, especially here where we've been developed for a very long time. Further, even new storm drain systems that are installed, say they develop a new neighborhood, they are sized using precipitation data from the 1960s. Now, my caveat there is that is currently being looked at to for change. They're working on changing that, but that is the current rule, is precipitation data from the 1960s. So you and I both know that the storms today are so different from the storms 50, 60, 70 plus years ago. We get more intense storms more frequently, and these systems were installed with different storms in mind. So we run into issues, especially as we continue adding these impervious surfaces, we run into issues with conveying enough water and the systems backing up and causing flooding. So it's something else that we need to be aware of as we go about this, is the water that we're sending to the street. We're really, the more water we send to the street, the more strain we are putting on these storm drain systems. So that's all well and good, but what can we do about it, right? What can we do about these things that I'm pointing out? Well, so like I say, I've put a few slides together, and hopefully you don't feel like this is jumping around too much, but it's really one slide for one tip. And I just kind of came up with as many tips as I could think of that were widely applicable. So we'll just jump through those real quick and, like I say, just one to the next here. But my first tip is really the overarching thing that I try to get through to any group of people, because it really helps to get at that problem of indirect pollution. Just work it into your thinking that the pavement outside is directly connected to the river, and then treat it as such. So my example for this is, if I have a car in my driveway and it's leaking 3 drops of oil a day, that's it. It doesn't seem like much, right? It's a very small amount. If I'm thinking in this way, that driveway is connected to the street, which is connected to the drain, which is connected to the river, then I need to ask myself, would I take those 3 drops of oil and throw them directly in the river every day? And the answer is no. And I think for the vast majority of people, the answer would be no. We wouldn't do that. We know better than that. That's disrespectful. It's wrong. Why would we throw oil in the stream? And so if I'm thinking in this way, that driveway is directly connected to the stream, I need to do something about that car, either get it fixed or put something underneath it to catch the oil. So if we can try to think like this as much as possible and treat that pavement as though it is the river, we will start to address a lot of these indirect pollution issues that we have. Another thing we can do, and this is probably the simplest piece of advice that I have today, is just don't dump anything in a storm drain. If you've ever done it before, just don't ever do it again. Like I say, these storm drains can often be seen as easy disposal pathways, unfortunately, and but we now know they are not from the information I've shown you today. So never dump anything in a storm drain. One thing that you can do that's a little more proactive is adopt a nearby drain. And, it's nothing official. It's nothing anything like that. But all I'm saying is, if you happen to have a drain near your house or near where you work, just keep an eye on it. The city does a fantastic job taking care of their drains and looking after stormwater. But there are more eyes in the public than there are with the City of Quincy staff. So we can all kind of do our part to look out for the storm drain system. Like I say, if you happen to have a drain near your house, just keep an eye on it. If you notice any damage, if you notice staining, that somebody's dumping something in it, if you notice it backing up during rainstorms, just let the city know. They would love to know where all of these problems are. And the easiest way is, we see them so often, to let them know. Further, if the drain that we're talking about is in a situation where it's safe to do so, you can also do a little more active care, particularly during the fall, like this picture is showing. When the leaves fall, we've all seen it, they kind of gather around these grates. Again, if it's safe to do so, if you live on a nice, slow residential street or something, you can rake those leaves away from the drain, put them with your leaves from your yard to be managed, however you're managing them. That's going to do a couple of things. It's going to open up the drain to allow it to flow more freely so we don't have backups. And again, it's going to keep those leaves from making their way onto the stream where they cause the problems we've already talked about. Going right along with that, we also need to properly manage our yard waste. We've already talked about the damage that leaves and grass clippings can do. So my advice is to manage those yard wastes in a way that they will not make it to the storm drain system. So composting is an option. Mulch mowing them directly on your lawn, that's another option. Or you could also bag them and put them out for town collection. That's the other option. But basically, do not put them out into the street. Don't Don't blow them down to the creek bed. Don't try to dispose of them in storm drains. All things that I've seen before, unfortunately. But just take care of them in an appropriate way to keep them from being exposed to the storm drain system. This one is one we're all familiar with for a variety of reasons, a lot of aesthetic reasons and things like that. But there's stormwater reasons too to pick up after your pet. As those little piles of pet waste are out there and they're exposed to stormwater, the stormwater can pick up pathogens. It can pick up excess nutrients, and it's pollution. And we all know how many dogs there are in the watershed, so it's a widespread issue as well. So always pick up after your pet. And then fertilizer. So I've touched on the damage that excess nutrients can do, especially from leaves and grass clippings. Fertilizer is even more concentrated forms of nutrients, right? Because that's all it is nutrients. So if we allow fertilizer to be exposed to stormwater and to be taken to the storm drain, it's really going to cause an even bigger problem. So if you choose to use fertilizer, I just ask that you do it responsibly and correctly and approach it with the respect that something like this deserves. It's so easy to just see a bag on the shelf and just throw it on the lawn, but it really takes a lot more thought than that to do this in a respectful way that protects our waterways. It starts with a soil test. UMass Amherst runs a soil testing program that they have instructions. It's very simple. You just get a sample of your soil and your lawn. They tell you how to do it. You send it to them. They send you back a report saying exactly what you need to add to make it healthy so that you're not polluting. You're not polluting by adding extra nutrients, and you're not wasting your money by buying different fertilizer or too much fertilizer. So start with a soil test, then do the math. Sit down, buy the fertilizer that they recommend, with the analysis that they recommend, 10-10-10 or whatever it happens to be, and do the math to make sure you're adding what they prescribe. It's going to involve, it's fairly straightforward math, percentages and things like that. And there is actually a calculator on a website. On my last slide has a website for the NSP. There's a calculator that can kind of help you through this process. But basically all I'm saying is take the steps to make sure you're following their guidelines if you choose to use fertilizer. And then the last thing is particularly if you're using a broadcast spreader like this fellow is, if any fertilizer pellets end up on impervious surfaces, sidewalks, driveways, anything like that, go along and sweep them up. They're not going to do any good there, and they are just going to go straight into the storm drain and straight into the stream. So make sure you sweep them up. Another thing we can do, this one gets a little bit more at that issue of water quantity and the storm drain system handling the water we send to it. But it's reroute our downspouts. And what I mean by that is just, maybe this weekend, take a walk around your residence, notice where your downspouts are going. Are they going out to the street or your driveway to an impervious surface, or are they going to the lawn? What we want to do is we want these downspouts to go to an area like our lawn or something to give the water from our roof a chance to soak into the ground, because that prevents it from going to these storm drain systems. And if we all send our roof water into the ground, that alleviates some of that demand issue on the storm sewer system. So you can do like these folks did. They routed them to gardens where they wanted a lot of extra water anyways, or you can even use rain barrels to help with that. If you don't have the option of sending it to a lawn, you can use a rain barrel, and that has the added benefit of collecting water that you can use later for free if you want to water your garden or something like that. And then I said we'd get to it. My pet peeve: environmentally friendly and biodegradable products. Like I say, like Julie said, I worked in municipal government before this, and I was in enforcement, and I tracked down a lot of pollution issues, and I heard this phrase more than I heard anything else, and that was, "Oh, well, this product is environmentally friendly. It doesn't matter if it goes to the storm drain. It's no problem if I let it go." And that's not true. That is simply not true. All environmentally friendly or biodegradable means is that it is less of a problem than the other stuff on the shelf. It doesn't help the environment, certainly. And there are a few issues that come from it being exposed to stormwater and getting into our waterways. I mean, for one thing, particularly if we're talking about environmentally friendly soaps, they're made and formulated so that they remove grease and oil from cars, right? Well, there's some organisms in the stream that have kind of a greasy, oily coating, right? So what happens if that environmentally friendly product ends up in the stream? What happens to that coating on those organisms? Beyond that, biodegradable, that just means it degrades, right? Well, I've already covered when we talked about leaves and grass clippings, what happens when these biodegradable materials degrade in the stream, in large quantities. It uses up the oxygen. So these things they're a great option because they limit your risk of the damage you do if something bad happened, but they should still be managed appropriately. And just because they're environmentally friendly, don't ignore what happens to them. You still want to make sure they don't end up in the storm drain system. And then my last tip for us today has nothing to do with the storm drain system. It has to do with the sanitary sewer system. So the sanitary sewer system is a separate network of pipes, and it handles the flow from our toilets, our sinks, our showers. It's where generally we'd say it's where our sewage goes, right? And what I am saying with this slide is don't put anything down the drain that shouldn't go there, because this sanitary sewer system relies on open flow, right? And if a clog begins to form, that flow backs up and it comes out the next manhole it can find. And this is exactly what you would see when you show up here. And once that sewage escapes that pipe system, it behaves just like stormwater would. It will find its way to the nearest storm drain and eventually to the creek. And we all know sewage in the creek is not a good thing. So as users of the sanitary sewer system, we need to use it responsibly. There's two big offenders that the two biggest offenders of this are number one, quote unquote, flushable wipes. They are not flushable. You'll see them on the grocery store shelves, they're like baby wipes for adults, and they may say flushable on the packaging. They are not flushable. Do not flush them. The only type of paper product that can be flushed is toilet paper because it disintegrates when it hits the water. Those flushable wipes do not, because they're already wet, right? They're not disintegrated. So flushable wipes cannot be flushed. The other big offender is cooking grease. If you have cooking grease and you put it down the drain, eventually that grease will find a spot in the pipe where it settles, and it will set up and congeal just like it does if you leave it on the counter overnight. And believe it or not, as that congeals, it will back up these pipes. I know it seems like it wouldn't have the strength to do that, but it does. I've worked a lot of sanitary sewer overflows, and those two things probably account for more than, of the ones I've seen, probably more than 50% of the ones that I've seen, those flushable wipes and cooking grease. So if you have cooking grease, manage it in some other way. I've seen folks freeze it and put it in the trash, things like that. So that covers the tips that I wanted to talk about, but I also wanted to use a little bit of time today to talk about what the city of Quincy is doing. Like I say, the city has recognized stormwater as something that needs to be properly managed, and has really done a lot of good work in that effort. So I just wanted to cover a few of the things that I'm aware of that they're doing. First, the city of Quincy is a member of the Neponset Stormwater Partnership, which that's a grouping of municipalities. It's kind of organized and managed by my organization, but it's really the municipalities group. All of these towns have been issued a permit from the EPA. The EPA has recognized stormwater as a major issue, right? So they wrote permits for each of these municipalities because they all have stormwater systems. And in those permits are requirements that the municipality has to do with the goal of protecting and improving stormwater quality and eventually protecting and improving surface water quality. So all of these towns have the same permit, so they all have the same requirements, so they all have the same issues, right? We're all in the same region. We face the same issues. So this group gives these municipalities kind of a collaborative space to talk about this stuff, to compare notes, to see how each other is responding, to simply cross paths once in a while and talk about things, because this is such a widespread issue that we have to approach regionally. Further, as part of this, my organization provides some technical assistance to these municipalities to help them figure out how to deal with some of the issues. We help them with bylaws, and we help them with some more technical technical things related to stormwater. And then the big thing that comes out of this group, I think, is a region-wide educational campaign. We at NEPRA, and I think all of these towns as well, have recognized the benefit of a regional approach to educating about stormwater, as opposed to the citizens of Quincy getting one message and the citizens of Medfield getting another. Having a regional message really makes sure all of the folks in our watershed are getting the information we want them to have regarding stormwater, so that they can take the appropriate responses, in their day-to-day lives. So Quincy is a big part of this group. We are really glad to have them, and they, like I say, they saw the benefit and jumped right on board with everybody else. So we are glad to have them. The other thing that I wanted to point out that the city of Quincy is doing is related to this concept of best management practices. So I'm going to refer to them as BMPs from now on, but best management practice. A BMP is a structural installation that is designed to collect and improve stormwater in some way, shape, or form. They come in all different shapes and sizes. It's an umbrella term, but these BMPs. So I said before how stormwater is not treated or filtered in any way, right? These BMPs are trying to be a filter or a treatment. We're trying to insert them so we can get some treatment and filtration on these storm drain lines. Like I say, they come in all different shapes and sizes with all different purposes. They can be very simple. You've probably heard the term rain garden. That's a common one. Or they can be more complicated and complex. But they all have kind of different goals with stormwater. Some of them try to filter the water. Some of them try to soak the water into the ground, which treats it and also removes it from the storm drain system. If it soaks into the ground, right, we're not asking the pipes to convey it. So that helps as well. So Quincy has recognized the utility of these BMPs, and I think they're whenever the city has a project, these BMPs are close to the front of their mind. How can we work them in? Because that's the challenge now is trying to figure out where we can fit these things in amongst our existing development. So like I say, whenever there's a project, I think it's always on the city of Quincy's mind, but they've also taken one step further, and they're actually working with my organization right now to look at existing properties in town and just find spots where we can put them in that would be beneficial and efficient and really have a big impact. So I have an example here of a project that we worked on. It's not in Quincy, unfortunately, but it paints the picture. So one of our staff members was at an elementary school and noticed these tree gardens, I guess, out front. And that's all they are. They're just ornamental, aesthetic tree gardens. And he said, we could probably do something with that. So they removed the gardens. They installed the proper infrastructure there, and they turned them into rain gardens. And now all the water that used to run off of that play area to the right of this photograph ends up in these rain gardens and soaks into the ground. So I know that, it seems like a small impact, but imagine if we did that on every property. You know what I mean? Imagine if we had a way to do that everywhere, and we could really limit that water that's getting into the storm drain system. So installing these things where we can is a very big tool in our toolbox of addressing these issues. And the city of Quincy, I think, is on board with that fully. Like I say, we're working currently on designing some projects, and we actually have 3 that are currently under design, one at Montclair Elementary, one at Snug Harbor Community, and one at Community School, and one at Beechwood Knoll Elementary. They're similar to this in a way. Often, schools are a great place to install them because not only do they work, and there's a lot of impervious surfaces at the school, so they can treat a lot of water, but also they can serve as an educational component. There's an educational component to them that can really help with the students. And education, as we've kind of been over, education about the issue is a large part of this. And by no means are these the only 3 places in the city that they can be installed. These are just the ones that this is just getting started. So these are the first 3. But again, I just want to thank you all for joining us today, and happy Earth Day. I've got some stuff up here on the screen. The first is the website for that NSP, that Neponset Stormwater Partnership. There's a lot of good information there about stormwater and pollution prevention. And that is also where you will find that calculator for fertilizer application, for responsible fertilizer application. The second is the website for my organization, which there's a lot of good information there as well. And then finally, that's my contact information. And please feel free to contact me with anything you have related to stormwater. I'm happy to talk about it. But that concludes what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Julie, I'm going to pass host duties back over to you. Oh, there we go.
Okie dokie. Thank you. That was an awesome presentation. I'm glad that we share a pet peeve with that whole greenwashing idea. I can't stand it when I see stuff out there that's environmentally friendly and biodegradable when, they're kind of just throwing those around to dupe people into buying them. So I would definitely recommend people do research on that front too. Really interesting presentation though. And I'd love to open it up to questions if anyone has any.
Julie, I don't have a question, but you mind if I say something?
Sure.
I just wanted to thank you and Patrick for an excellent presentation. I really appreciate you bringing light to some of the serious issues. I know Julie has been speaking with me about a number of areas within Quincy that have been impacted by many of the issues that you raised, Patrick, and the greater public education that we can raise that'll make our efforts to restore these resources all the more fruitful. So I appreciate all the work that your organization does and certainly taking the time to be with us today on Earth Day. So thank you.
Absolutely. You're happy to be here, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Anybody else? And as I mentioned, this will be available on QATV. That's why I'm recording it right now. So feel free to watch this over and over again, and it will be available to a wider audience in the coming weeks. And I appreciate that all of you joined us today. Happy Earth Day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.